What if you discovered that your entire life was built on a forgotten promise? That the hardships you faced were the echoes of a love story you never knew existed? For one waitress, a single cup of coffee changed everything. This is a story about a tarnished silver locket, a debt that could never be repaid with money, and a test of character so profound it could either shatter a woman's spirit or reveal the truth of who she was always meant to be. The rain fell in relentless sheets against the diner's large plate glass windows, turning the neon open sign into a blurry, bleeding halo. For Alara, the dreary Tuesday was just another tick on a calendar filled with them. Each tick was a bill coming due, another copay for her brother Leo's medication, another shift on her aching feet. She moved through the greasy air, a ghost of a smile fixed on her face for the few customers hunched over their meals. Her life felt like this diner, worn out, smelling of stale coffee and desperation, but still stubbornly open for business. Then he walked in. He didn't belong. His coat, though soaked, was of a quality she'd only seen in magazines, dark wool, cut with an unforgiving precision. He was older, his face a roadmap of stern lines and quiet sorrow. His eyes a pale, piercing gray that seemed to take in everything at once. He sat at the counter, away from the other patrons, and ordered a single black coffee. He didn't look at the menu. He didn't look at her, not really. He just stared out at the rain-streaked street as if waiting for a world that had long since passed him by. When it was time to pay, he fumbled through his coat pockets, a flicker of something. Annoyance? Embarrassment? Crossing his features. "It seems," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I've left my wallet at my office." The old Alara, the one who wasn't counting every single dime, might have just smiled. But this Alara felt the familiar knot of panic in her stomach. $3.50. That was a bus fare. That was half a loaf of bread. But then she looked at his face again, at the profound weariness in his eyes, and the hardness in her own heart dissolved. She saw not a rich man in a bind, but just a man. Tired one. "Don't worry about it," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "It's on me. Everyone has one of those days." She keyed the amount into the register, paying for it with the last of her own tip money. He finally looked at her then, truly looked. His gaze dropped from her eyes to the delicate, tarnished silver locket that rested in the hollow of her throat. It was her mother's, and her grandmother's before that. Her only link to a family she'd never known. A strange, unreadable emotion clouded his face. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement that felt heavier than words, and walked back out into the storm. Alara didn't expect to see him again. People like him didn't frequent places like this. So when he walked in the next afternoon, the diner sun-drenched and quiet, she was stunned. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He sat at the same stool. "I believe I owe you for a coffee," he said, placing a crisp $100 bill on the counter. "Sir, this is way too much. It was only a few dollars." He pushed the bill forward. "Consider it a finder's fee." His gaze was intense, analytical. "My name is Silas Sterling. I have a proposition for you." Alara's mind raced. Was this a joke? A scam? A proposition? "I require a personal assistant," he stated, as if discussing the weather. "The duties are varied. The salary is $200,000 a year. Full medical benefits, effective immediately." The number hung in the air, so absurd it was almost comical. $200,000. That wasn't a salary. It was a lifeline. It was Leo's specialist appointments. It was medication without having to choose between groceries and prescriptions. It was a life without the constant, grinding fear. "Why me?" she finally managed to ask, her voice a whisper. "You don't know anything about me. I'm a waitress." "I know you paid for a stranger's coffee when you couldn't afford to," he replied, his eyes once again flicking to the locket at her throat. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character. The position is yours if you want it." He placed a business card next to the $100 bill. "My office address is on the card. Be there tomorrow at 9 a.m. to discuss the details. He stood, turned, and left without another word, leaving Alara staring at a sum of money that could solve all her problems and a business card that promised to create 1,000 new ones. Hope, terrifying and unfamiliar, began to bloom in the desolate landscape of her heart. She didn't understand his motive, but she understood desperation. For Leo, she would walk into any mystery, no matter how daunting. The Sterling Enterprises building was a monument of glass and steel that pierced the sky, a world away from the cracked linoleum of the diner. Alara felt impossibly small as she rode the silent, high-speed elevator to the penthouse office. The doors opened not to a reception area, but directly into a vast, minimalist space. Polished concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a godlike view of the city, and a silence so profound it felt heavy. Silas Sterling sat behind a desk that looked like a single, massive piece of obsidian. "Miss, I never got your name," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite him. Alara Vance." A flicker of something crossed his face at the name Vance, but it was gone before she could decipher it. "Alara, your duties will be straightforward. You will manage my schedule, organize my correspondence, and accompany me to certain functions. Primarily, however, you will be a presence here. This office has been empty for too long." It was the strangest job description she had ever heard. The days that followed were even stranger. Her tasks were minimal. She answered a few calls, sorted mail that seemed mostly unimportant, and spent hours in the quiet, cavernous office, feeling more like a museum piece than an assistant. Mr. Sterling was often there, working silently at his desk or staring out the window, lost in thoughts he never shared. He was a man surrounded by immense wealth but wrapped in an impenetrable cloak of loneliness. The real work, she began to suspect, was something else entirely. It was a test. She was being observed, measured against a standard she couldn't comprehend. One afternoon, he broke the silence. "That locket," he said, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. "You never take it off." Alara's hand went to it instinctively. "It was my mother's. She passed away when I was young. She said it belonged to her mother, Lena." "Lena," he repeated, the name an echo in the quiet room. "Tell me about her." "I don't know much," Alara admitted, a familiar ache settling in her chest. "My mother never knew her own father. Lena raised her alone, working small jobs, moving around a lot. She died young. All I have is this, and a few faded photographs." She hesitated, then felt a strange compulsion to continue. "My mother always said it was a promise, but she never knew what for." Mr. Sterling's expression was unreadable, but his hands, resting on the desk, had clenched into tight fists. He seemed to be on the verge of saying something more, something important, but the moment was shattered by the chime of the elevator. The doors slid open to reveal a young man in a suit so sharp it could have cut glass. He was handsome, with a practiced smile that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. "Uncle Silas," the man said, his voice smooth as silk. "I came as soon as I heard you'd finally hired some help." His gaze swept over Alara, dismissing her in an instant. "I'm Marcus Vance, Mr. Sterling's nephew." He extended a hand to her, his grip firm and proprietary. The shared surname landed between them like a challenge. Alara was distantly related to Marcus's father, a branch of the family her mother had been estranged from. "Alara is my new executive assistant," Sterling said, his tone flat. "Is she now?" Marcus's smile widened, but it was all teeth. "How resourceful of you, uncle. Finding talent in the most unexpected of places." The condescension was thick, a poison dart aimed directly at her. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a constant, unwelcome presence. He would appear unannounced, finding fault in her work, making comments just loud enough for her to hear about her clothes, her background, her presumed incompetence. He treated her not as an employee, but as an infestation, a gold digger who had somehow tricked his powerful uncle. "You have to understand," Marcus said to her one day, cornering her by the coffee machine, his voice a low, threatening purr. "My uncle is an eccentric man. He's prone to charitable impulses, but they fade, just like the people they're directed at. Don't get too comfortable. His suspicion was a suffocating fog, but it was Mr. Sterling's own enigmatic behavior that truly unsettled her. He would give her strange tasks, like asking her to organize his old personal study, a room that had been locked for decades. No one has been in there since, for a very long time, he told her, handing her a tarnished brass key. Just sort the books and papers. Put them in some order. The study was like a tomb. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the grimy window. Everything was covered in white sheets, ghostly shapes of furniture long unused. It smelled of paper and decay and forgotten things. It was in the bottom drawer of a heavy mahogany desk that she found it. A small, rosewood box tied with a faded velvet ribbon. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of yellowed satin, were stacks of letters, tied in bundles. They were written in an elegant, looping script. The first one she picked up began with the words, "My dearest Silas." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew she shouldn't read them. It was a violation of the trust Mr. Sterling had placed in her. But she felt a pull she couldn't explain, a sense that the answers to all her questions were right here, in this box. She untied the ribbon on one of the bundles. The letter was dated over 50 years ago. "My dearest Silas," it read, "the city feels so empty without you. I hold the locket you gave me and pretend it's your hand in mine. You called it a promise, and I am holding you to it. Come back to me soon. Papa is getting worse, his talk more bitter. He says a man like you would never truly choose a girl like me. He says your family will see to it. But I don't believe him. Our love is stronger than their prejudice. Isn't it? Forever yours, Lena." Alara sank onto the dusty floor, the letter shaking in her hand. Lena, her grandmother, and Silas, Mr. Sterling. The locket. It wasn't just a promise between a mother and daughter. It was a promise between a man of immense wealth and the poor girl he loved. A promise that, for some reason, had been broken. She spent the rest of the day poring over the letters. They told a story of a passionate, secret love affair, of clandestine meetings and whispered plans for the future. Then, the tone changed. Lena's letters grew more desperate. "Silas, why won't you answer? It's been weeks. Papa was right. Your family sent a man to see us. He offered us money to disappear. He said you had agreed to it, that you were engaged to a woman of your own station. I tore up the check, but I can't tear this pain from my heart. Was it all a lie?" The last letter was almost illegible, stained with what could only be tears. "I am leaving. I can't stay in a city that is full of you. I am carrying a part of you with me, a secret you will never know. I will love you until my last breath, even though you broke my heart. Goodbye, Silas. You're Lena." A child. Her mother. Mr. Sterling had a daughter he never knew about, and Alara was his granddaughter. The revelation was a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. This wasn't charity. This was a penance. He knew, or he suspected. The locket had been the key, and he had brought her here to see if the lock would turn. He was testing her, searching for a piece of Lena in her, a confirmation of a truth he was too afraid to ask for directly. Her new reality was fragile, built on a foundation of old secrets. Before she could decide what to do, how to approach Mr. Sterling with what she'd found, Marcus made his move. He cornered her as she was leaving for the day, his expression one of smug victory. "My uncle is a generous man, but he is not a fool," Marcus began, blocking her path to the elevator. "And neither am I. I've been watching you. I'm just doing my job, Marcus." "Are you?" he sneered. "Or are you playing a longer game? It's quite a story you've concocted. The poor waitress, the family heirloom. It's almost poetic." He stepped closer. "This morning, a very valuable timepiece went missing from my uncle's desk. Patek Philippe, a gift from my father. It's worth more than you'll make in 5 years." Alara's blood ran cold. "I didn't take anything." "Of course not," he said with a cruel smile. "But you were the only other person in the office. Security is on their way up. They'll have to do a routine search of your belongings. I'm sure you understand. It's just protocol. It was a trap as perfectly engineered as the watch he claimed was missing. He wanted to humiliate her, to discredit her in front of his uncle, to paint her as the common thief he believed her to be. This was her test. Her integrity against his poison. She could break down, protest, accuse him, all of which would make her look guilty. Or she could stand her ground, armed with a truth he couldn't possibly comprehend. She lifted her chin. Fine. Let them search. I have nothing to hide. The two security guards were apologetic but firm. They asked her to empty her purse onto the coffee table. A wallet, keys, a tube of lip balm, a paperback novel. Then they asked to search her coat. As one of the guards reached into the pocket, his fingers closed around something hard and metallic. He pulled out a gleaming, gold-faced watch. Marcus's gasp was perfectly timed. There it is. I knew it. The air crackled with tension. Alara stared at the watch, then at Marcus's triumphant face. Despair, cold and sharp, pierced through her resolve. How could she fight this? It was her word against his, and she was a nobody. That's enough, Marcus. The voice came from the doorway to the study. Silas Sterling stood there, his face like granite. He hadn't been in the office, or so she'd thought. He walked slowly into the room, his eyes fixed on his nephew. Uncle, I'm so sorry you had to see this, Marcus started, oozing fake sympathy. I was trying to handle it discreetly. I'm sure you were, Sterling said, his voice dangerously quiet. He turned to the head of security. Check the security footage from the West Lobby camera, time-stamped at 8:15 this morning. You'll find footage of Marcus slipping that watch into Miss Vance's coat before she even arrived. Marcus's face went white. The color drained from his skin, leaving a pasty, terrified mask. Uncle, that's ridiculous. Why would I? Because you are your father's son? Sterling cut in, his voice raw with a half-century of pain. You see a threat, and you seek to destroy it with lies and money, without any regard for the truth. He dismissed the guards with a wave of his hand. They took the watch and retreated, leaving the three of them in a suffocating silence. Sterling's gaze fell upon Alara, and for the first time, the veil of the powerful billionaire fell away. She saw only a man, old and heartbroken and filled with a terrible regret. The letters, he said. It wasn't a question. She could only nod, tears welling in her eyes. He sank into a chair, the weight of decades pressing down on him. I never got them, he whispered, his voice cracking. My father, he told me she'd left, that she'd taken money from him and run off with another man. He said she was just a common girl after our fortune. I was young, arrogant. I believed him. I let him poison my memory of her. He looked at Alara, his eyes pleading for an absolution she didn't know how to give. I spent 50 years believing the woman I loved had betrayed me. I buried myself in work, built this empire on a foundation of bitterness. I never loved again. And all this time, she was writing to me. All this time, she was waiting. The full, devastating truth settled over the room. His family had not just separated two lovers. They had stolen a life. They had stolen his child, his grandchild. They had stolen his capacity for joy. She had a daughter, Alara said softly. My mother. A single tear traced a path down Silas Sterling's weathered cheek. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I see Lena in your eyes. The same fire, the same integrity. When you paid for my coffee that day, refusing to let a stranger be embarrassed, it was something she would have done. And when I saw the locket, I had to know. He looked from Alara to Marcus, who was now trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. So this is it? Marcus spat, his composure shattering. You're going to throw away your family for this waitress and her sob story? She is my family, Silas said, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. More family than you have ever been. The confrontation came not with a shout, but with the cold, calculated precision of a corporate execution. Humiliated and facing disinheritance, Marcus made a final, desperate play. He leaked a carefully fabricated story to a notorious gossip blogger, painting Alara as a masterful con artist who had preyed on a lonely old man, using a family trinket to spin a tale and secure her fortune. The story was vicious, filled with anonymous quotes from concerned family members and former colleagues who questioned her character. Instead of hiding, Silas called an emergency meeting of the Sterling Enterprises Board of Directors. He had them assemble in the main boardroom, a sterile chamber of chrome and mahogany high above the city. Marcus was there, looking smug and defiant. He believed he had won, that public shame would force his uncle's hand. Silas walked in with Alara by his side. She was terrified, her hands clammy, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. But as she looked at the faces of the powerful men and women around the table, she saw not just a corporate board, but a jury. "Before we begin," Silas announced, his voice steady and strong, "Miss Vance has something she would like to share." All eyes turned to her. This was her moment. She was no longer the passive waitress, the confused assistant. She was the keeper of a stolen history, the voice for a woman who had been silenced. She took out one of Lena's letters, the last one. "This isn't about a claim to an inheritance," she began, her voice trembling slightly before finding its strength. "Money can't fix what was broken. This is about the truth." She read the letter aloud. She read of Lena's love, her heartbreak, her fear, and the secret she carried. When she finished, a profound silence filled the room. "My grandmother, Lena, died in poverty. My mother worked herself to an early grave. All because a powerful family decided they were not good enough. Because their letters were intercepted, their love was sabotaged, and their story was erased." She then looked directly at Marcus. "You are just like them," she said, her voice clear and cutting. "You saw something you didn't understand, and your first instinct was to destroy it. You didn't see a person, you saw a threat to your wallet. You tried to ruin my name and my character, just as your grandfather ruined my grandmother's life." Silas Sterling placed a protective hand on her shoulder. He presented the board with a sworn affidavit from a former household staff member of his father's, long retired, who confirmed the story of the intercepted letters and the payoff his family had orchestrated. The evidence was irrefutable. The moral bankruptcy of Marcus's actions, laid bare against the backdrop of this historic injustice, was staggering. The board's decision was swift and unanimous. Marcus Vance was removed from his executive position and stripped of his seat on the board, effective immediately. Silas made it clear that the process of formally disinheriting him would begin the next day. Justice, after 50 long years, had finally been served. The fallout was immediate. Silas legally established the Lena Vance Foundation, an endowment dedicated to providing educational grants and medical assistance to single mothers and their children. Its first act was to ensure Leo received treatment from the world's leading specialists. Alara's new reality solidified. She was no longer just an assistant. She was the head of the foundation, the guardian of her grandmother's legacy. One afternoon, Silas led her down to the garage beneath the building. Under a silk cover sat a gleaming cherry-red Ferrari. "Every young woman should have a little freedom," he said, a rare, gentle smile on his face. "Lena was never able to have hers. This is for you." It wasn't about the money. It was a symbol of a life unbound, a future she could drive into on her own terms. Months later, the city lights twinkled below the penthouse windows like a fallen constellation. The sterile silence of the apartment was gone, replaced by the soft murmur of conversation and the occasional, happy laugh from Leo, who was now healthier and stronger than ever. Alara, Silas, and Leo sat together on a plush sofa, looking through an old photo album Alara had found. Silas pointed to a faded picture of a young woman with fiery eyes and a radiant smile, a silver locket gleaming at her throat. "That was her," he said, his voice thick with memory and love. "That was your grandmother." In that quiet moment, 3 generations, torn apart by prejudice and greed, were finally reunited. A broken promise had been mended, and a family, lost to time, was finally whole. A single act of kindness, a cup of coffee for a stranger, had unraveled a lifetime of secrets. It reminds us that our character is not defined by what we have, but by what we are willing to give. How many other stories are waiting to be uncovered, just beneath the surface of an ordinary day? If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of compassion, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that celebrates the best of the human spirit.